Facebook Live series. We have the best guest on the show today. I'm super excited. I introduced her when I put my post out this morning as one of my most favorite humans on the planet. And I really am not, I never say that about guests on here. So you know I'm telling the truth. It's more than just a special guest. It is the special guest. Miss Shelley Burgess, we are so pumped up to have you on here today.
That was so nice. That was such a nice thing to say. You're one of my favorite humans also, Tara. And I love what you're doing with the show. I'm really happy to be here. So thanks for having me.
We are so glad that you're here. Y'all, it's not very often we get Shelley on video. It's very rare because I always ask her, I'm like, hey, will you send a video? Will you do this? Look, welcome, Monica, Lisa.
Hi, Monica. Hi, Lisa. Hi, Michelle.
Yes, I'm always asking her, hey, come join us. And she's like, Tara, you know I don't like that. But today she agreed to join us, so I'm super excited.
It's hard to say no to you.
I know. And Dave said, who is
Oh, hi, honey.
So welcome. Please do introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, where you're from. Remember, all of the comments, just like it has been all week, are entries to win a free book. Shelley and I will choose a winner or a couple winners after the show, and we will send you a free book that relates to mental health awareness. She is greeting everyone while I am telling you this real quick, but remember, every single entry is every single comment is an entry to win one of those books. So you definitely want to comment. We're going to be talking a little bit about mental health awareness. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. This is this topic that is super important and something that's near and dear to both Shelley and I's heart. And so we're probably going to keep it pretty real in here today. So please do share. It's going to be a little different than some of the other shows that we've had, but it's the same topic. It's a real good conversation. And I think you will leave here today just feeling a little more empowered to work with your students or maybe your own kids as a parent as it pertains to maybe mental health awareness or social emotional awareness and health. So yeah, welcome Deborah, welcome Monica. We're excited. Shelley, tell us a little bit about your background. Most people know you already, but for anybody, you have some brand new DBC Inc. followers in here that have been joining all of these shows, and they may or may not know you and what you've done in the past. So tell us a little bit about you, what you do while they're introducing.
Sure. Yeah, so Shelley Burgess. I am very proud wife of Dave Burgess, who I think most of you know. Honored to be the mother of two incredible teenagers. Hayden is 19, Finn is 16. They are the greatest gifts and blessings of my life. And then also have been a longtime educator, started off as a middle school teacher. I moved eventually into sort of teacher leadership roles, coaching, resource teacher types of positions, and then moved eventually into administration, been in elementary school principal and assistant superintendent of educational leadership, coach, principal coach. So kind of that's a little bit about sort of my roles and things in education. Co-author of Lead Like a Pirate with an amazing principal, Beth Huff. And also P is for Pirate with my wonderful husband who is in there. And then now I work full-time with Dave, with Dave Burgess Consulting and the publishing and those kinds of things. So that's me. All my leadership, all my education experience was in San Diego, California. I was born and raised there. But I'm actually currently talking to you from Hawaii, and I don't want to make you jealous opening my window to show you my current view. It will be loud. The blinds have to go up, but and you'd also see my children out in the pool doing a scuba lesson. So
awesome. We're all envious of Hawaii right now. I can tell you that. Unless there's some Hawaiians in here, then you can show us your view. Yes. Shelley is also she is my boss. And so I just absolutely love her. I can speak to her leadership. It's so genuine, so real. She's always about family first. And that is one of the things that I just appreciate so much about you when it's come to all kinds of things that this company is thriving, by the way. It's just like a little empire. But one of the things I think you and Dave do such a great job of is just always reminding us, all the employees and the authors, just that it's all about your family first. And then we put the work in. And I kind of just want to go there today, just because I know that you and I both share that sort of passion when it comes to mental health and when it comes to mental health awareness. So, I mean, Shelley, I know you've dealt with a little bit of this in your own family. Please do share anything that you feel comfortable sharing with our audience, and how you have just become more aware of the mental health of students and that of your own child.
Yeah, and I do, I'm happy to share. I always like people to know that I share with Finn's permission. Finn is very much it is empowering for them to be able to tell their story, to be able to talk about their journey. And so I do want people to know that if I talk about my child and some of the struggles that they have had and that we have had on the journey, it is because they give consent for me to do so. And so so I do appreciate that. But yeah, I think some of you know, I know Terry, you know, but we have a child who in 8th grade we would have said, I think Dave and I would have said, was maybe having their best year ever. Like our from the outside looking in as parents, you know, think like this is such a great year for friends and friendships and school and work and all those kinds of things. And then we had an incident that sort of slammed sort of right into our faces that we were wrong. We were wrong. They weren't okay. We learned some things that were going on with them that were very scary for us as parents, and quickly got in connection with a pediatrician, psychiatrist, therapist to get involved, and learned that they were diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety, and also was suicidal. And so we have lived that journey with our child. It is something that is still with them. That is a struggle that they still have. And so we have been navigating parenting through that process. We've been navigating schooling through that process, and you know, trying to balance all of the mental health and well-being for our child, along with the, you know, we have school, we have to like life and living and getting the most out of life. And so it's a constant journey that Dave and I are on, and certainly that Finn is on. But we wouldn't have guessed. And I think that's the thing that I would share with is that we thought everything was okay and great until it wasn't. And it took us by great surprise that that our child was struggling mightily with mental health. So
I think that's the scariest part, because Caleb, my son, I know some of you out there have heard me speak of him before, and he also has battled with depression. And so that's the hardest part, because he's had just a great little, in my mind, he's had a great home life compared to what I had growing up, you know? And I'm like, why would he, but the thing about depression and mental health awareness for me that I've learned as my years as an adult is that it's no respecter of persons. It doesn't really matter who you are, what accomplishments you have or don't have, what money you have or don't have. It doesn't, that doesn't really matter. It affects everyone in different ways. And I think that's like you said, it's the scariest part, because what you see on the outside and what's happening inside the heart sometimes is totally different.
Yep. And I think that, you know, I think that our children in general, you know, no matter, our children want to please us. They don't want to burden us. They don't want to, and so I think it was a blessing for us that eventually our child opened up to us about what was going on, and it wasn't even necessarily, it was really a friend who helped push them to. They had been talking to a friend about things that were going on that were really serious, and we actually credit this friend for really, I think, helping save their life at the time, who had said, if you don't tell your parents what's going on, I will. And so I applaud a young 13, 14-year-old child for recognizing that part of being an advocate for your friend, it isn't always that there is a point where you have to stop keeping confidences. And so the fact that I do, like I credit that friend many times for helping really save their life. So that was and I think your point too, and I see Claudia is putting this up there, is that mental health, it can affect anyone. And even when on the outside, they seem like they're doing okay, that internal struggle that they're having is so real and can be so intense. And I think it's such a hard thing to be a parent or an educator to recognize the signs. We're better at it now than we were, but you especially, I think, when people are teenagers, because there's teenagerhood that also is a part, like there's moodiness. There's moodiness for almost every teenager. There's struggles for almost every teenager. There's, drama for tons of teenagers. So that being able to separate the two, what's just the normal course of being sad or frustrated or upset as a teen versus what is really clinically severe depression or anxiety. And it's a hard line to recognize, I think, sometimes for parents and for educators, which is it that's happening.
And I think we experienced something very similar, very similar. And Caleb's dearest friend, second grade on, all the way through high school, still his friend today. He hung out with him yesterday. That's the friend that convinced Caleb to call us at one of his lowest moments when he was hanging out with them. And that's when we found out how this has been going on for like 6 months, like a long time. Yeah. And Caleb's pretty private anyway. And so, yeah, it was super overwhelming, and almost like I just felt super guilty that I didn't notice it sooner, because we're pretty tight. I only have one kid, so I just have one kid to focus on. And I'm like, how did I not see this? I'm an educator. Like, why did I not see this sooner? But I think that's the hardest part, and I saw some people asking were there some signs, and I think now I recognize them only because we've been through therapy for 2 years now. And so I kind of know what to look for. But before, no, I would say there were no signs.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think in hindsight, you were able, Dave and I were able to say, yeah, you know what, that was happening, or this was happening, or, but this was the second teenager that we were raising. Our first teenager had attitudes and anger and, like that's just a time. And so you just chalk up some of that stuff to just being normal because you're 13 or you're 14. And like I said, hindsight is 2020. And certainly there were some things that were there, but we miss them. And you feel as a parent, and Tara, there's guilt that, you feel this overwhelming sense of, wow, like, it's that you want to protect and take care of your kids always. And so when you miss them, and I'm seeing what Deborah says, kids carry so much weight on their shoulders. And I don't know that we always really, there's that, kids are kids, and kids are going through, and they're going to come out the other end, and they're going to be fine. And, we're just going to give them space and give them love. And it's hard when you miss it. For me anyway, there was a lot attached to that. That I didn't see it.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. And a lot of times too, I think I would always just hear people, even to me, just say like, you need to think positive and you need to focus on the positive. But the truth of the matter is, when we started the therapy, we started working with the therapist, and you can't just think positive out of those situations. That's just not the way it works. Yeah. And I think as educators, I've heard this happen a lot, even when I was in the system, people just like, just don't know any better. So the leader's just like, hey, you just need to think positive and things are going to get better. But I think there are times where you can't just, I think that's part of that mental health awareness. You can't just think yourself out of some of these situations, especially not severe depression. And so I think it's really important as educators, you're talking to us from a parent perspective. And I'm kind of interested to know, like, how did Finn's teachers deal with this situation? And I mean, that's probably, just share as much as you can without throwing anybody under the bus. But I think it's really important as educators, and there's a lot of educators in here today, to kind of hear that perspective.
Yeah, I can. So we, so as we were navigating it all in the beginning, they were in 8th grade. They were in a middle school. They'd been in the middle school since 6th grade. And in their seminar program, which was a sort of small, kind of like a small school within the school, kind of situation. And it was about halfway through 8th grade where all of this sort of came crashing down, little more than halfway. It was in 2nd semester of 8th grade. And so we let the teachers know, we let the principal know what was going on. We let the teachers know what was going on. And the responsiveness from that team of teachers was phenomenal. Just that anything we can do, the mental health is more important. I remember one of the teachers texting me. There had been a series of things that Finn hadn't turned in for a period of time. And the teacher texted me and said, I'm clearing all those zeros out of the grade book right now. I'm clear, so there was, we had a, kind of the SST type meeting, about the diagnosis and some accommodations and things. And the team couldn't have been more supportive and just wanting to help get them what they need. We actually at the time made the decision to pull them out of school for a little bit on an independent study contract because it was really hard to get to school. It was really hard to navigate school during that time. And so all through that process, check-ins from teachers, how are things going, is what I'm giving too much, too little. And so the support and the belief that the mental health came first was very, very, the love for them and their needs was very well felt by all of us. So what I will say then is, when we got through the summer, and then they were moving in and starting high school, and we're starting high school in a pretty good place mentally, kind of going in after the summer was on kind of an upswing. And it was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 weeks into 9th grade, they had a real downward turn, and the depression got really bad. And in that time, it was missing some student, couldn't get up to go to school, failed 3 or 4 tests, failed, and then just had a miserable couple of weeks with school. And so we knew it was time to have a conversation about what was going on. And the response from the teachers in the high school was really devastating to us. And so we got responses back from teachers that were like, well, I don't give makeup tests. Sorry. Like, that's just after failing a test. I had emailed all the teachers the situation about what was going on and the medical diagnosis. I had no teacher except one respond to that email that I had sent out to all of the teachers. And it was the teacher who shared no makeup tests allowed. I had, meetings with the counselor. I had meetings with the assistant principal, we didn't get any of that love that we got at the middle school. And there was no real breaking of the policies or the routines or the procedures. And so that was a real challenge for us. And I think that more like everyone who's watching, we're all educators. We work in the education system. Dave and I, just like all of you, know exactly what to do. We know that we can demand a 504 plan. We know we've got a medical diagnosis. We can demand accommodations. We can do all of those things that other parents might not know. But we at that time, we didn't have the fight in us to do that. And so we ultimately made a decision. We pulled them in, and Dave and I never thought that we would do this in our lives because we're huge proponents of public schools, but we ended up pulling them out, and they have been enrolled since in a virtual online private school that allows flexibility of time, flexibility on assignments. There's a long, there's nothing that has to be due Friday. If there's a due date Friday, it's okay if it's Tuesday. If you fail a test, there's always an opportunity to make it up. If you have anything less than a 70% on any assignment, it's actually expected that you redo it. Like, that's just part of the process until you have more mastery. And so I think for us, that really saved their GPA and their grades. I think part of what happened was, and that still matters for colleges and that's it. And I think one of the things in thinking back on it, and one of the things that was different was that in middle school, they had built all their school cred. They'd been there for 3 years. The teachers knew them. The teachers knew what they were capable of as a student. And when there was a downturn, they knew something was off. Because it was not who they were used to. It's not who they knew for 2.5 years. The start of the high school was there was no school cred. The teachers didn't know them from anybody. And so this is a student, they're absent, they're failing a test, they're failing it. And it just, we didn't have that. And like I said, none of us at the time really had the fight in us for that. So that's a little bit of the journey that we've had with school. And in school, even in the online environment with all the flexibility, school is still hard to navigate because school is still hard for them to concentrate on sometimes and do sometimes. And so we're still navigating those waters. So that was a long answer to your question.
No, it's perfect. And I think it's so true. It's so great that you shared both perspectives, a team of teachers that knew them for a long time and knew when things got off, and was able to just come in and be that support system versus when you join a new team, and it can even just be a new grade level, especially in these bigger schools, where one grade level of teachers doesn't really speak to the other grade level of teachers, these really big schools, how different that can be. It goes back to what Deborah mentioned, we have to build relationships with our students. I know we've heard that 1,000 times, but it's so true. I'll never forget sitting in a meeting for Caleb with his English teacher, and and this paper that I knew was stellar. The first one he wrote, he deserved that grade. But the next one, I helped him. I made sure it was ready. It was his junior year, and junior year was the worst. Like, that was the most depression, the most everything that kid was going through was just, it was horrendous, a little bit, but anybody listening. So I sat in that meeting with that English teacher, and I remember just talking about this paper, and I knew it was a good one. I helped him write it. And so I'm wondering why she gave such a terrible grade. And I was walking them through the rubric and then the paper itself. And she just didn't like the topic. That really is what it boiled down to. And I was like, do you realize when you put these grades on my child's paper and you give them no options to do any better, that you cost us hospital trips? Like, do you understand what my kid goes through when he has to deal with this?
Right.
And they're like, no, I had no idea. Yeah, because you don't know my child,
Right.
It would be great if you actually try to get to know your students, because you would understand that little stuff like this sends him spiraling down for a long time.
Yeah.
It takes me a long time to recover from this. And it's simply because when we got to the bottom of it, she just didn't like the topic of the paper. So he got a terrible grade. Well, that's uncalled for. That's not even good teaching. And there was no option to try to make it up. And I think sometimes, maybe educators get into this place where you're going to do what I say when I say it, and kind of this old school mentality. But I don't know that all of them are always thinking about what that does to the student and their mindset and their mental health on the other side of that.
Well, I think what you're saying too, Tara, is and every child's response to that is different. And so that's the thing, for one child, it's not a big deal. And for another, it's devastating. And that's there's such a unique, the mental health needs of our children, they're different, and they have different amounts of what they can cope with and the capacity, and I think one of the things that I learned, about mental health as we were going through this, and I had never really known this, and so it was new information for me when the first person that we had contacted was their pediatrician, who we love, who loves them, and and one of the things that she told me is that we think of teen years and we think of the puberty and the developing brains and all the things that kids are, the raging hormones, that our typical thought about that is the kid who was more like my son, right? That was the attitude, the getting angry, that pushing, rebellious, kind of behavior, not really being able to control like the sort of lash outs, kind of stuff like that. That's sort of what we think about when we think about the raging hormones, but that one of the things that she said is that it is actually a very common, that a hormone like response, that it really creates the what's happening in the brain that is causing the depression, and is also a very natural reaction to what happens to kids as they are teenagers, and that it is as common as that typical response that we see from other kids, or we think to be typical response. And I think that that's something that's really important for educators to know. I did not know that. I did not know that a hormonal reaction of puberty can be depression and anxiety at a clinical level, like not just I'm sad today or moody today kind of thing, that it is equally likely. And that the good news about that is that some of them, just like kids come out of the sort of terrible teen, pattern, they come out of the mental health pattern. Some don't. Some it's going to be a lifelong battle, and some it's just those teenage years. But I wish there were more information about that for educators in schools and systems, and what the teenage brain does and can do, and that what are the supportive ways to respond to that. But we don't get, that is not a big part of our training as educators. That's not a big part. When you teach middle school and high school, and I taught middle school, that's where I taught, those were not things we were learning about. We weren't learning about teenage brains and responses, and I think that's an important piece that is missing in just the learning that we do as educators, and some of those old school practices that you were talking about aren't the right way to respond or to get. And so anyway, but that's a little bit, it was really helpful for me to learn much more about that teenage brain and how it can respond in that time where it's developing and they're changing and their hormones are raging. So that was helpful.
Me too. And that was one of the first things our therapist kind of helped us with understanding. And I felt like I was always looking at brain science when it came to learning, but this was a new way of looking at the teenage brain and how it, like you said, just how many of the responses look very similar to other things that you've seen in teenagers, outrage. One of the things, I don't remember who mentioned it earlier, might have been Nicole, about they internalize that as my son. Like what comes out looks like normal behavior, but what's internalizing and what was happening on the inside was devastating. And once we finally figured it out, we were able to, get the help and the treatment that we needed to help with that piece. But also, I think it was really important for us to realize it's hard to navigate as a parent, by the way. I know you're really good at it, but for me, it was really difficult
You could be involved in all our conversations, Terry. You will know that's not actually true. We are a work in progress.
We're work in progress as well. Trying to calm that fire, like never making a big deal out of anything. And Caleb's made a bunch of mistakes. Like, oh, whoa, he is an intense little guy. He gives us a run for our money. But always, the therapist had to help us as much as he had to help them. Keeping calm, like nothing's a big deal. We're really, no matter what it is, totaling the car, whatever it was, we just had to keep everything at a level playing field. Like, and that was really tough because I'm just a very emotional person. I'm a living emoji, and I'm constantly like, oh my God, but keeping all that calm, because the more heated we got, or more excited we got, or worried we got, or frustrated we got, the worse it got. And what happened was the worse it got on the outside, but also the internal stuff that was happening was like off the charts. Yeah. So that was a really tough thing. And I think as educators, it's important for us as educators to try to, like, nothing's really too big of a deal. And I love that you talked about this earlier, Shelley, about giving them second opportunities, the online school, giving them second opportunities to complete work. That is life. Like, you're my boss. And there's never a time, Shelley, that you've said, you know what, you're going to get this right the first time. And if you don't get it right the first time, you're fired. Like, it just doesn't happen like that. I screw up stuff. You give me a second opportunity and I get it right. And I think that's the way it should be in school. I don't know why we have this old mentality that things have to be done right the first time. Like, come on, that's not real life anyway.
I see Claudia has a comment about peer pressure and causing some students not wanting to talk or share their stories out of fear of being singled out. And I so agree with that. When there is still that there's and I think it's getting better, but there is still a stigma around some of the mental health discussions, or and I do think it's getting better. And but I do think that kids are afraid. They don't want to be seen as different. They don't want to be, especially in those really vulnerable teenage years. And at the same time too, one of the things that I have seen is that once Finn was more able to talk about their journey, one of the things that I've been incredibly impressed with is that there are a group of people that they spend time with. They are a little more open about sharing. Like, there's not quite the same, like when I was growing up, like that would like to talk about being depressed or having anxiety, or would have been like that. Those would not have been conversations that I would have with my friends. But they are more open to having those conversations with each other, I think, than we were in the past. But there still is a lot of that fear too. They don't want to be singled out. They don't want to be different. And so they're navigating a really intense emotional, mental journey, while also trying to navigate like you've talked about, the external world, and how do I want to present myself to the world and to my teachers and to my peers, and is it safe to share the struggles that are going on, or is it going to make it worse? And so that's, I think, a constant thing that they're thinking about.
It's so true. And I think too, a lot of times, even as adults, we shy away from the topic of mental health awareness. We shy away from the topic of therapists.
Yep.
I know that I know when I first saw a therapist, it was 10 years ago, or 12 years ago was my first time to see a therapist. And I remember not telling a soul. Like, I was embarrassed of it. It was, I couldn't deal with my father's murder, and I was just struggling in all ways, personally, professionally, every way. And I knew I needed help, but I didn't want to tell a soul because it was embarrassing.
Yeah.
And so now I see a therapist every month, if I need her or not. I don't care. And I tell people that all the time, only because I don't think I've been diagnosed with like severe depression or anything like that. I've had moments of depression that I've gone through in my life, but it's nothing that I've not been able to manage with therapy, and usually some different strategies that we put into my work, my everyday life to keep me going. But I will say, I don't want it to be a stigma. I mean, if you need
Yeah.
to take medicine for high blood pressure, you should be able to I should be able to tell you, Shelley, I'm taking some medicine and my blood pressure's down.
Yeah.
Well, if I need to see a therapist because it helps me to stay mentally healthy, that should be something that we could be able to talk about. But for some reason in our world, it's still not a normal thing. It's so embarrassing.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, I will publicly share that I am now the proud client of a therapist. But it was actually very hard for me to take that step. It was very, very hard for me to take that step and admit that I needed somebody to help me sort through. And I think a lot of us, I'm used to being that person to other people. I'm used to being the person who helps other people through and navigate through things that are tough. And I'm used to, and so there was a point recently where it was like, what would I tell me if I were like, what if I were talking to someone in my situation, what would I be saying to them? And I have to honor myself enough and to say, then I deserve that too. And so so yes, I am now a very, and it is helping me. It's helping me navigate through some things that are very challenging.
I tell my therapist all the time, the only thing I would have done differently is start sooner, because she's given me so many cool strategies, and she's just able to look at, she's the only person on the planet that's ever read any entries inside my daily journal. And I let her read them because she can just see them from a different perspective sometimes, and I completely trust her. But one of the things that she commented on my journal one time was like, Tara, I see you trying to coach yourself. And I think this is what you were and I was literally coaching myself in my journal multiple times throughout my life's journey. And she's like, you knew you needed this. Like, don't ever take it away. Like, there's no reason to take it away. We're here for you. We're here for each other. And it's just been so beneficial. I think everyone with a heartbeat, you don't have to be diagnosed with depression and need a therapist. It's just a really great, if you find somebody you trust. If you don't, then keep looking around, because it took us a while to find a good one for Caleb that worked well for him. But for me, I just got really lucky and I got the best one right off the bat. But when you have that, it's just so helpful to navigate life's challenges, especially if you're dealing with a child that deals with depression. She's really helped me in that parenting aspect.
Yeah, well, and I think it's the giving ourselves permission. I think it was, I might be wrong. I think it was a quote from Kerry Washington that I had seen at one point, Kerry Washington from Scandal, and if anybody watches it, but anyway, but and about seeing a therapist, and the quote really was, it's really important to me to see my doctor for my physical health, to see why wouldn't I also take care of my mental health, my heart health, that's the whole being of you. That's the whole being of a person. And why would you only have checkups and physicals and even if you're not going through something, why wouldn't you also have sort of checkups and check-ins on your heart and on your mental, health as well. And so I love that. I'm certainly not quoting her directly, but it's the sentiment is there. And I think that's a really, there was an important takeaway for me.
Totally. It reminds me a little bit of Dr. Derlin and I were talking about the other day. I was talking about kickboxing, which is strange because she was talking about the mind, and keeping the mind healthy keeps the body healthy. So she's a wellness doctor. She does whole body wellness. She's therapy too. She's just like a jack of all trades. And one of the things we talked about, I said, oh, that reminds me of what my coach said when I was a kickboxer. He said, where your head goes, your body follows. And so he was constantly telling me to keep my guard up, protect your mind. Don't let the kicks come to your head, because where your head goes, your body follows. But I think that's true in the inside too, not just the physical body, but where our mind goes. When somebody mentioned we have 80% negative, our minds are 80% negative. I would believe that's probably true. And so where your mind goes, your body eventually follows. Your health starts falling down. Everything starts falling down. So that, just like you said, you wouldn't want your physical health. You want to go to your wellness checkups. So why not check out your mind too? It's perfectly, we're two awesome ladies right here telling you it's fine.
There's a really great blog post I read the other day, and I'm going to forget who it is by, but I'll share it on Facebook. I'll share it in response to this, and it was actually sent to me by a friend who had just read it and said, it had been a really helpful article, and I'll put it in here for anyone who wants to take a look. It'll take me a second to find it, but I'll reply to this Facebook Live for anyone who wants to read it. But I will tell myself sometimes, and if you read the article, you'll understand this, but I will remind myself sometimes right now, it's time to breathe and float. Like breathe and float. And so there's a lot of things that they talk about in that I think are very mentally healthy practices, when you're struggling. But like I said, I'll share it in case anybody else is interested in reading it. But yeah, I think that you're very right in terms of that connection between mind and body.
It's huge. And I'm just so grateful for those of you in the comments that are just like, hey, I also see a therapist. I also see a therapist. I think more of us need to share our stories because it's just important. I mean, that's what this month is all about. We're talking about our kids. We're talking about our own health, what we're doing to try to stay healthy mentally, physically. And as educators, it warms my heart to see that you, one, are compassionate about that enough to talk about it publicly in our Facebook Live. And then also just it lets me know that I think you will have that same empathy for your students. And that just makes my heart so happy because I wish Caleb would have had that experience with all of his teachers and it wasn't quite that way for him. Yeah. So gives me hope.
Well, I do want to share too, just real quick, Tara. I know we're kind of past our time, but I will say there's lots of good organizations out there too. Like even if you're not ready to take the step to go and see somebody, there are organizations like the NAMI organization, the JED Foundation. There's several others, but that are that have resources and have things to read and have information where you can sort of arm yourself with information about trauma or mental health or depression, and those are sometimes just a good place to start. And the JED Foundation, well, I know but I'll share it with Mental Health Awareness Week. One of the things, the DBC family, many of you who are in here who are commenting, helped us raise over $5,000 to give to the JED Foundation through donations of some of the conference registration fees and some of the conference T-shirts and those kinds of things. And so we're those types of organizations, even if you're not ready to pick up the phone and call somebody, or you have a student and you're not quite sure how to help them, or you don't know, where to go, those are a great place to start. And there are lots of organizations. And like I said, those are two that I find a lot of resources from, the JED Foundation and NAMI, which is I'm going to get it wrong. NAMI is the
Hawley Thank and her school works.
National Association of Mental Illness. It's but there are lots of, and I see Hawley says that their school works with NAMI. There's lots of great resources, places to go, either for yourself, for yourself personally, for your child, for students in your classroom or in your school. Those are a couple of places to start. Really good organizations.
And you and Beth put out a blog on leadlikeapirate.net recently that had a lot of those resources. So I'll make sure when we tag up the comments of this video at the top, I will add some of those resources. Okay. Oftentimes at the end of the show, I'll go back and put some of those links that we talked about. So I'll make sure everyone's listening and in the comments.
So what I'll do, I'll send you the link. I'll send you the link to that article I was referencing so it can all be together.
Yes, that'll be perfect. Okay. So y'all, we appreciate, Shelley, we just appreciate so much you sharing all of your amazing wisdom, your learning through life experiences with this. And I can relate so much to you. I think I look up to you, actually. I'm always like, what would Shelley do? That's really what I need to try.
I'm going to tell you, there's times you don't want to do what I do.
I feel like you have it a little more figured out than I do. But friends out there, we're all in this together. But the point is, if you're in here and you're listening to the show or you're watching it on the playback, that you actually care. And that's the first step, really. Just actually caring and being aware that everybody is struggling through something. And so it's important that we just try to recognize everybody's individualities. So Shelley, you're just a beautiful human. I'm so excited.
I got you, my friend.
Shared your journey. Any other wisdom you'd like to share with anyone before we close out today?
I think we've covered it, and I think you wrapped it up so beautifully, that it's about taking care of ourselves, taking care of each other, taking care of our students, giving ourselves grace. We're not perfect, and we're never going to be perfect. We're not expected to be perfect. So finding that space with yourself, with your students, with your teams, that it's okay for us to be who we are and to be doing the best that we can with the best information that we have. So I think, you said it more eloquently than I did, but there's my.
I think you said it beautifully. And I think it's just important, one more time, just before we get off of here. I think a lot of times people, I know, like, before I've looked at Shelley and I'm like, man, she looks like she's got it all together. Everything's all together. Like, how am I going to get it all together? And people say that about me. But the truth is, we're all just real humans, navigating this thing called life. And we're all in this together. So I really appreciate, Shelley, you sharing your story, but also just allowing other people to feel comfortable, even just in this chat, to share their pieces of their story. So remember, all of these comments will be used to decide someone's going to get a free book. We will choose, Shelley and I will get off of here in a minute. We'll choose, and then we'll put that in the comments too. So you'll know that you can email me and I'll send you out a book tomorrow. It's my perfect opportunity to go get some coffee and get out of my house too. So I really get excited about mailing that book off to you. So thank you for joining our chat. Remember, our shows wrap up today. So this is the last one for this week. We'll start again next week, Monday through Thursday at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we are just so grateful for all of your support. So thank you, Shelley, again.
Thank you, Tara. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.